Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Radical Civility. My name is Benjamin Piccini, and I think that today's topic is going to make everybody mad. We'll see. I don't write to be provocative, but I think that this one needs saying, and so we're going to discuss a little bit today. And if it does make you mad, I have an idea for that. So I made a Facebook page for this podcast, and then I figured out fairly quickly that Facebook pages don't really work the way that I thought they do. I created a page, but the only way I can advertise to everybody is by paying a bunch of money for it. So I've created a Facebook group, which apparently is very different from a Facebook page. And so when I make you really angry, I would encourage you to comment. Come to the Facebook group. The group is called the Radical Civility Laboratorium. It's just a fancy way of saying laboratory, but the idea here is that we try out our ideas about radical civility in a specific place, and we get together and we discuss things. We do it civilly, but we do it honestly, and I'm excited to see how it goes. We'll see. So feel free to look that up. I'll also link the page in the comments on both Anchor and on YouTube, so that if you happen to chance upon it, you might be able to see it there. So let me tell you a little bit about where this specific topic for today came from. I was talking with a friend of mine. He's in law school right now. And he said, we just really need to abolish prison. And I said, I think I know where you're coming from. But I don't think abolishing prison is a good idea. He said, no, of course it's not. I know it's not. But I don't think most people know how hellish prison is and how bad of a thing it is. I said, okay, that's fair enough. And we had this good conversation about abolishing prison. And I said, well, what if we tried to abolish crime instead? What if we try? And he said, well, do you mean, legalize all the things? I said, well, yeah, partially that. But it's legalizing more things while at the same time focusing on personal private behavior. And we had this really long, interesting conversation that kind of spurred today's topic. And I think that it's something that needs to be discussed more. So with that, let's get started. Today's topic is the social moderate. So, a couple of years ago, I asked a question on Facebook. I said, imagine if politicians won, not by telling you what you want to hear, but telling you what you need to hear. What would they tell you? And it was a very entertaining conversation. Try it sometime on your wall and see the kinds of funny responses that you might get. I remember a few people said things like, I can only remember now my favorite one, which was, I don't know you, but I know that you probably eat too much. and the joke is, on average, Americans eat more than they ought to. And it was breathtaking because you can't imagine a politician saying that. And, part of what's interesting about democracy is the customer is always right and the voter is always the customer. And so what politician is actually going to say ever, actually, I think this is something that the people are getting wrong? The answer is no one will ever say that because they want to get elected. So they'll talk about how voters are smart and Americans are the most American out there, right? And they'll say all of these things that make you feel warm and fluffy inside, but they'll never say, actually, I think that this one is one that you need to fix on your own. And that's a pretty good introduction to what I'm talking about today. Today, I'm talking about the social moderate. And the very simple version of it is this. When I take political quizzes, it'll often say, do you consider yourself a social conservative or a social liberal? Now, I know that these are just, online quizzes. They're not meant to reflect the nuance of life. But I feel like this is a pretty common dichotomy here. Right? We see a lot of this division between social conservative and social liberal. And I don't think that either of those fit me very well. And I don't think they fit a lot of people very well. Right? On the one hand, you've got social liberals that kind of conjure up this notion of go with the flow hippies that let anything go and be a libertine and live your life and live your life however you want to. And it's great. And I accept everything you do. And then on the other hand, you've got the social conservatives who are proto-fascist religious zealots who think adulterers should go to prison. Like, neither one of those really feels super good to me. So what is a social moderate? Well, I'm going to start with a clip from Tyler Cowen. I love Tyler Cowen. Every time his music comes on for his podcast, Conversations with Tyler, I get excited.
Conversations with Tyler is produced by the Mercatus Center at George Mason University.
He is a deep-thinking intellectual who writes books, reads books, and thinks thoughts. and is paid to do so. And I'm very jealous that he does that. But I want you to listen to this clip of Tyler Cowen as he says something that caught me off guard. There was a 2.5 hour long, very, very long podcast that he was on in which he explained his views on everything from space travel and why humanity needs to travel to the stars and what is real happiness and how do we create it for people and futurism. I mean, it spanned everything. And in the middle of it, he just mentions this briefly, which caught me by surprise.
One of my kind of personal crusades is just we should all be more critical of alcohol.
So I want to repeat that. His goal is to get people to think a little bit more clearly about alcohol. Let me play the full clip for you because I think the full clip is pretty meaningful. It says something that I think is really important.
Just the susceptibility of people to alcohol. We take it for granted, but so many lives are lost each year, so many careers ruined, so much productivity lost. One of my kind of personal crusades is just we should all be more critical of alcohol. People will pull out a drink and drink in front of their children. The same people would not dream of like pulling out a submachine gun and playing with it on the table in front of their kids. But I think it's more or less the same thing. And to a lot of liberals, like the drink is okay and the submachine gun is not. I think if anything, it's the other way around. And I encourage people to just completely voluntarily abstain from alcohol and make it a social norm. Okay,
so how can a libertarian, I mean, to be clear, Tyler Cowen is a libertarian. In fact, he is a libertarian of all libertarians. He runs a libertarian think tank. He's a professional economist who works at one of the most libertarian schools in the country. Libertarians got famous for advocating that we legalize weed and allow polygamy to be endorsed. I mean, they basically say nothing should be illegal anymore. We should allow absolutely everything unless it really gets down to something where you're hurting or killing somebody else. How is a libertarian going around saying alcohol is bad? Okay. Example number 2. So I follow a number of friends from Italy. I lived in Italy for a while. And there's currently a news article that's generating a fair amount of outrage. We are in the midst, by the way, in case you listen to this a few months from now, we're in the midst of the coronavirus, and it is hitting Italy pretty hard. And this telejournalist went to Naples and interviewed a number of people at night who were out about town, having a drink, getting dinner, enjoying themselves, after they had been told to quarantine. Now, my friends are very, very frustrated by this. I'm guessing most of Italy is frustrated by this. I don't think that all Italians are this way. I'm sure that if America was told to be put under quarantine, which may yet happen, who knows, I suspect that a journalist might do something similar and might find places where there are still people going out and taking risks. But it doesn't change the fact that there's this conversation going on about personal responsibility on the one hand and don't judge me on the other hand that we haven't been able to negotiate very well. As a third quick example in passing, it seems very much the case that complications from coronavirus, COVID, I believe the statistic that I found was that it is 14 times more likely that you will have serious complications from coronavirus if you are a smoker. And when you look at the differences between men and women, when you look at the differences between the elderly and the young, and when you look at the differences between countries, Italy, France, and Iran, many of these there are correlations between high smoking rates and not high smoking rates. From my own experience, Italy was a very high smoking country. I believe that France was too. I want to be clear, I am not implying that smoking causes coronavirus. I'm saying that coronavirus already exists, but if you are smoking, it damages your lungs and makes things far, far worse. So what does this all have to do with each other? Well, I don't think we have a good word to describe something in between social conservative and social liberal. And I know that I'm neither one, and so I'm advocating for a new piece of vocabulary. I'm calling myself a social moderate, and I think you should be one too, and this is my pitch. I don't think you should be a social liberal. I want you to consider how many social problems could actually be solved by personal agency, by individuals doing the right thing. Looking at it from this perspective, lung cancer doesn't need to have a cure discovered. There already is one. We just need to stop smoking. Much of heart disease and diabetes can evaporate. We know what to do to fix those. The world's economy suddenly finds itself with powerful shock absorbers, not because of the action of central banks, but because households and firms do all in their power to act responsibly, to save for a rainy day, and to be ready for a crisis. In this world, abortion has largely vanished as a political issue, not through legislation, but through deliberate personal decision-making of all involved. Now, I suspect that at least one of those examples rubbed somebody the wrong way. Let me reiterate. I think we vastly underestimate the extent to which individual agency can solve a number of societal ills. The best way to interrupt intergenerational poverty isn't a social program. It's staying in school, waiting to have kids, and getting and keeping a job. The best way to cure a whole host of societal ills is through the best parenting that we can muster. That by itself is a topic that we could cover for very, very many small podcasts. Maybe we'll do that another time. Okay, so that's why you shouldn't be a social liberal. There is, in fact, a measurable difference between certain patterns of behavior, and there are some that are objectively better than others. So why not be a social conservative? Well, to put it bluntly, because prison is hell. It's a blunt instrument. It creates more problems than it solves. Incarceration does not fix people. In fact, the evidence says that it makes people worse. So the rallying cry for us moderates is that you can be a social libertarian without being a libertine. So why aren't we already this way? Why aren't we already saying, yes, it should be legal, but no, it's not recommended? I think it actually has to do with social desirability bias. Well, in the first place, I think it has to do with that there's not a whole lot of nuance. If something is bad, you make it illegal. If something is good, you encourage it and you make it legal. We need to get out of that frame of mind because we can. I remember an ethics professor once drawing on the board a line straight across. And he said, this is what's legal and what's not legal. And then well above it, he drew a second line straight across. He said, this is what's ethical up here, and this is what's unethical. Part of the problem with using incarceration as the measure of what is ethical is that we miss everything in between those two lines. There is far more to life than simply staying out of prison. We can do better than that. But I think that there's a second reason, and what it really has to do with is what a lot of people call social desirability bias. We are more worried about losing our social standing than telling the truth. We don't want to come off as judgmental or unkind, and so we kind of shrug our shoulders and say, well, different strokes for different folks. And sometimes that's true, by the way. There are cases in which different strokes, different folks works great. But it turns out that there are many in which there is an objectively better and worse way. Well, civility is honesty. It's telling the truth, even if that truth makes you a bit unpopular. I don't believe in non-judgmentalism. That is the triumph of nice over true. There's a great essay that was required reading at my university that was called When Nice Ain't So Nice. I can't remember a word of it, but I remember that the premise was that sometimes nice is just selfishness with a pretty disguise. So I'm against non-judgmentalism. Does that mean that this is all just a plea for judgmentalism? Well, not quite. I prefer the term judicious. And what, pray tell, is the difference between being judgmental and being judicious? Well, put simply, it's the following three things. Being judicious is warning people before they stumble. Being judgmental is blaming them after. Same concept, same communication. Hey, I recommend you save a little for a rainy day. You're not in a pickle. You're not in hard financial times. It's just wise to save for a rainy day. That's judicious. Oh, you're in trouble? Well, maybe you should have saved for a rainy day. That's judgmental. See the difference? Number two, being judgmental is about everybody else. It's about all of those people out there. Being judicious starts with the person in the mirror. And number three, being judicious is about compassion for the future person. Being judgmental is casting blame on the past person. Often being judgmental allows us to not feel like we have any obligation to fix something. We don't have any obligation to help somebody because it's really their fault. Whereas being judicious actually holds us accountable and makes us feel like, no, I need to do everything I can to help this other person. And the way I can do that best is by empowering them. Before my grandfather died, he sat me down and I didn't know this, he does this with each of his grandchildren when they leave college or about to get married. Start for college or about to get married. And he gave me a book. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. It's a very old book now. And he said, this book has the secrets of the universe. And I kind of laughed because it was a bit melodramatic. And I read the whole book and it was very good. It was a very basic story about investing. And it was a very straightforward, you should save some money kind of a book. And I laughed and I said, well, that's kind of silly. I mean, I've known that for a long time. The wisdom in him doing that, though, has come to me over and over again. By giving me a little book and a little speech about the secrets of the universe, he empowered me. He gave me the ability to have power over my life. Being a social moderate means that I think that other people deserve to be empowered, not condemned. I'd rather give them a little book than a lot of extra help later. Because if you believe in people sufficiently, then you give them the chance to solve their own problems. Not only are you solving their problems, you're also giving them dignity. You're giving them a sense of self and identity. And I think that has a little bit to do with civility at the end of the day. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you find it helpful. Radical Civility is written, produced, and edited by Benjamin Puccini. The views in Radical Civility are not necessarily